Recording in progress.
Is not on the meeting agenda to ensure that everyone, including those joining us remotely, are able to hear all speakers clearly. So speak directly into the microphone. Know that all comments are limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by city staff. I would now like to ask City Clerk Walker to explain what comments will work.
Thank you. For each item on the agenda, there will be time for public comment. We will accept comments in 3 ways. First, we will take in-person comments for each item. Please fill out a speaker card and turn it in to me if you wish to speak on an item. There's a countdown timer displayed on the projector screen to help speakers keep track of the remaining time to speak. Second, we will also accept comments from our Zoom participants. To give a public comment via Zoom, please utilize the chat box. When using this method, name yourself so that your first and last name are reflected for the record. If the comment is regarding a specific agenda item, please indicate which item. Comments will be accepted only until the end of the public comment period for that item. Please keep in mind that if there are technical difficulties with Zoom, the meeting will proceed as normal. The city will do its best to resolve any technical issues as quickly as possible. I will then state the amount of public comments we have received by email for a particular agenda item. Due to technical limitations associated with gathering, printing, and sorting emailed public comment, the city has instituted a 3 p.m. cutoff the day before Friday City Council meeting for email public comments. This is to ensure there is significant time to gather and provide the emailed comments to the City Council. Any comments received after the 3 p.m. deadline will be included in the public comment record, but will not be provided to City Council during the meeting.
Okay. Does anyone here wish to speak at this time? If so, please say your name and address for the record. Seeing none, do you have any public comment requests submitted electronically?
We do not.
Okay, all right, let's move to new business item number 1. Can we please have an introduction from CD manager?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and council members, and happy Friday. This morning, we begin in earnest our 2024-2025 budget process as we dive into our priority leadership discussion. As I begin the PowerPoint, I wanted to begin by saying that in the staff report you read that while this is being presented initially by myself, I have to give kudos to all of the staff, the department heads, our analysts, all of our managers, every staff member from the front desk all the way up that has helped us throughout the year in the budget process to get us to this point. This is, as the staff report reads, one of the most important and heaviest lifts for city staff and for the city council. This is something that we take is our work plan for the year, our policy guide for the year. So we take this very seriously. And today we're excited to kick this off with. On this first slide, some of these things I will highlight and move through fairly quickly here this morning, but I am highlighting these just for those that are watching at home and for the members of the public. The council is aware these are our 8 critical success factors that we have. You see these on every single agenda report. These are posted in various places throughout our offices at City Hall. We hold these very highly for all of us as staff because this is very important for us. Things like maintaining a safe community, our well-maintained infrastructure, our beautiful preserved single-family neighborhoods. These are things that we remind ourselves daily and work towards achieving as your city staff. In the staff report, you also saw that for the priority initiatives, 2 of the main thresholds that they need to meet are representing a shift in city policy or exceeding the city manager's procurement authority. Outside of the budget process, this is where we come to you to ask for guidance on larger items. In this current year, we have 7 priority initiatives that we've been working on. And very quickly, what I'd like to do is give you all an update on the various 7 items we've worked on. We have some important progress that we've made, but these 7 items, I'd like to say, have been very heavy lifts for the staff and the community, given the gravity of the items. Things like the Vacant Homes Initiative, working on Stoneman. These are things that, as the council outlined back last year, are going to be multi-year projects. And you will see later on in the presentation, we've intentionally not loaded up very heavily on priority initiatives. We've for this next year so that we can focus on executing these initiatives really to the highest level possible. On this first vacant homes initiative, we have successfully began the implementation of our vacant homes properties enforcement, our pilot program this past year. Lost that, that'll come back up, but as it's coming back up, since launching the program, our code enforcement staff have canvassed the city, resulting in vacant home registrations increasing by 59%. And that's a really good start for us to chip away at within the first year. We've gone from 16 registrations all the way up to 39 registrations. We're continuing this, and a citywide mailer to educate homeowners on this is going out within the next couple of weeks. We've been working with staff to plan that workload so that we don't have these kind of peaks and valleys of staff work. So this letter, as it goes out, will allow the code enforcement staff to really work through the next tranche of vacant homes that they get registrations to it. Staff will also continue to revise this outreach throughout the process, education, making sure that this is something that we continue to build on with our lessons learned. Given the importance of this to our community, the way it translates into students at our school district, our tax revenue for our businesses, this is something that we're going to continue to fine tune and work on, and not just for 1 year, but for several years moving forward. The second item here you see is our economic development plan. A letter was sent out to commercial properties to notify them that the COVID-19 leniency that the city council had authorized several years back was coming to an end. So this was an initiative that we're trying to revert back to our standards for signage, for different things like that. And this is something that our community development staff have been handling very delicately. They worked on this through the holidays to make sure that the businesses were not impacted during the peak sales periods. So I'm very proud of the way that we've been working hand in hand with our business owners to make sure that we balance this tightrope of their interests and the community's interests in preserving our part of the job there. We'll also continue on this particular item on the economic development plan. There are several community meetings planned with our businesses. I've met with several of our businesses, as has our community development director, Mr. Figueroa. And we will continue to meet. We plan to meet with our mission district businesses here within the next, I want to say, month and a half. Oh, next week, I think, 2 weeks from now. So this is a plan that we have in place. We're working on this with the mission district. We're working on our businesses here on Huntington as well. This last item here on the Snowman Path Forward, this is again one of the heaviest lifts this community will endure. We've identified 3 potential options for the Snowman property, and we're working with the state's Department of Housing and Community Development to really flesh out those 3 options. We need to research the ramifications of those options on our housing element, on compliance with state law. Thank you, that turned off. Thank you very much. On our compliance with state law, and we will also be having several conversations with the state as we have been on this property, given that it was included in our one of our prior drafts of our house bill. Once we've completed working internally on these 3 options, communication with the state and HCD on those options, we'll then be back to speak with the city council, and then we'll undertake a fairly robust community engagement process. This is something that will span months and months throughout this year. We want to make sure that the community understands what is going on there. We obtain their input for the council to use that in your calculus of moving that forward. But we expect this engagement process to begin in earnest within the next 2 months, sometime in March. This is, again, one of those big community watershed moments for San Marino. We want to make sure that we execute this to the best we can. On this next slide here, I'm going to talk briefly about our traffic improvement initiative. The citywide traffic improvements primary focus is on the evaluation and update on signage and striping of our school zones and safety of our students and other pedestrians. We want to ensure that our school zones are in full compliance with the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and we're working towards that with several work orders out right now. The city's on-call traffic engineers are completing this evaluation with the submittal of the report and the identifying recommended improvements expected again in March of this year. This, again, as part of the evaluation and the recommended locations for solar power radar signs will also be identified in the report. We'll be replacing existing message boards on Huntington Drive, and concurrently the Public Works Department is working with the Police Department to identify locations where additional solar power radar speed signs may be beneficial along the arterial and collector streets. Finally, this is a very critical piece of this. As part of this initiative, staff have been working on the development of a residential streets traffic management plan. This policy will help guide the uniform procedures to address resident traffic concerns. Myself, our police department, and Director Shaw, have been working on this for several months. We're very excited to get this out there and help our public understand the process through which they can go to request different types of traffic or considerations that they'd like, so that we can study it, understand it, and then make professional recommendations so that the council can then budget accordingly if infrastructure improvements are needed. Lastly, on this slide, you'll see we're talking about our security initiative, something that our police department is always working on. They found that we do not need a security consultant by requesting some quotes from our current police department camera provider. So they're looking for efficiencies on this initiative and are working to make sure that we stretch the city council's authorized budget as far as possible. We're engaging the current camera provider on quotes to make sure that we're in line with the current year's budget request for this initiative. We're hopeful to bring this forward again within the next few months, but this is something that as we work on for our city facilities, it translates into additional safety for our community as well by virtue of how our cameras are placed, the visitors to our city facilities, whether they be our Crowell Public Library, City Hall, the community center next door. So we're very excited about moving this forward in public safety for our community. Next here, one that really, I think our staff and the community really came out shining or excelled quite well at was rebuilding our sense of this past year. Total participants for community service programs was increased over 8% from fiscal year 22-23 to fiscal year 23-24. 8%, and it's really quite amazing the number of folks that we had turn out at all of our different events last year. We also hired a facility supervisor position that was requested as part of this initiative, and you may have seen him actually just outside working on the building this morning. But that really helps make sure that we have facilities that our community loves and appreciates, and they can come out and take enjoy as part of our public offerings. The new multicultural event that was requested as part of this initiative was also held this past summer and was praised by participants. We had over 1,200 participants, and we learned quite a few really important details as we carried that out, things that we're going to build on this coming year, things about the start time, things about our participating groups. It was really quite an amazing event. One of those ways that we harness the diversity in our community and build on that and get folks out to utilize Lacey Park and really see what this San Marino has to offer. Our recreation division also put together 5 new community building events, and we have new ones that are planned to come out from last year. They started in November and will continue throughout the rest of this fiscal year all the way through June. And here, the last one on this slide, our enhanced safety program. 2 additional officers, police officers, were requested as part of this initiative and are actively in recruitment. I believe we have only 1 vacancy remaining in our police department here, Chief Nice. So we're doing a great job of getting our police department staffed up. And this really translates into safety that you see on your streets. So the council is to be commended for this initiative and how you worked with our police department or our community to make sure that we budget for this and get safety being one of our top priorities. The police department also just closed applications for the management analyst position that was requested as part of this initiative. And we hope to have this filled within the next month or 2. Additionally, the records clerk position that was requested here is being worked on, and we hope that as soon as this receives approval from the association, the job will go out to the city, the job posting will go to the city council for approval and then be advertised for recruitment. All of these positions especially have translated into or will translate into some efficiencies within the police department, specifically to better serve this community. So we're adding some staff there, analysts, records clerk, that hopefully will be better responsive to the community and really show this how important public safety is to San Marino. With that, I'm just going to pause for a quick second and see if there are any questions on any of the initiatives, on the updates that I just provided. I know I ran through them fairly quickly, but these are also in your staff report as well, and general public can also find them in the attachment to our staff board. Seeing no questions. Oh, yes.
As part of our the traffic improvement initiative, especially around schools, have we looked into whether or not there was a huge battle over the metro money? Is that metro money still available? Because we identified the schools as where the money should be sent to improve traffic flow there. Have we determined whether that money's still available? What's the status of it?
The Metro 710 money is available. It's still under contract with the city. The status of it, Ms. Shaw is nodding. She's working on an update with Metro. We've been going through it with our consultants to dust this off. It's been a couple of years. We will have a more robust update specifically on that because of the sensitivities around that money. We're trying to make sure that we broach that delicately, but we'll have a more robust discussion about it.
Well, there was a decision ultimately as to, and there were around the schools and then Atlantic, which seems a lot more brave. But the schools, that was well discussed, and I think that there was a consensus that should move forward. So just as long as it's being considered as part of that Trappers initiative.
Indeed, absolutely. And our hinge point right now is making sure that Metro continues to agree and continues to approve our spending allocation. Thank you for the question. All right, what you see before you, and this is for the public, as the council's gone through this several times, but this is our budget calendar and the cycle. The importance of this is that as we're here in January and working on our education, our policies, and our principles around our budgeting process, this is something that we continue 12 months out of the year. As we work on the budget for the first 3, 4, 5 months of the year, we then work on implementation. But throughout that, we are fine tuning it. We are coming back to you, as you saw last month, for appropriations when necessary. We are bobbing and weaving, as I might say, to the economy, to the way that conditions might change around the city, where things need improvements. So this is something that we work on 12 months out of the year. I'm remiss to mention that we have our interim finance director here with us. I just wanted to introduce Mr. Terry Shea. He's here in the first row. He and Mr. Siegfried will be working with myself and the rest of the directors and staff on this budget process throughout the next several months. But this, again, as you can see, really, we have this in a cyclic process every single year. It's really one of those important things that we do as this.
Welcome.
Yes. All right, so the importance of what we're doing today. So I will go through some of the priority initiatives or all of the priority initiatives that were provided by staff through our input process that we've been working on really since late November, December, all the way through here we are today. I will be introducing a slide that the several topics that are on the slide, and then the department director will come up and give you a very high level brief overview of that topic and entertain questions from the council on that topic. We'll then, as I mentioned, take questions. We'll have an opportunity for a comment, and then go through and add their council's pleasure. Bless you, sir. By way of context, so as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that we have roughly the same number of priority initiatives that we're proposing, but the lift for this following year, there has been some significant weight on focusing on what we need to continue to work on this last year. This, for context for those that are at home, we are working on several large things that have budget implications, such as our labor association, labor negotiations with our associations. We have an election later this year. We have our public safety parcel taxes will be on the ballot later this year. Some very large things that are coming up within the next 12 months. And so by design, the priority initiatives that are being recommended to the city council this year are really introspective and trying to make sure that we focus on the city's organizations, general health and well-being in our system, so that we can deliver services throughout the next year and moving several years beyond that to the best of our abilities. Things that are focused on technology and operational things so that our community can better interact with us. We are looking at things like fleet management so that we can save money moving forward on an ongoing basis, not have lumpy expenditures. All of these things that we're proposing now are forward-looking for the general benefit of the community so that we can better serve the community. With that said, I'm going to highlight let's go through here. Our first one, again, top priority, public safety excellence. Continuing this, and this is something we work on day in and day out. The three items that we're highlighting here are the educating of the community on the public safety parcel tax, body worn cameras for our police department, and traffic safety recommendations. I'll run us through our parcel tax item here, just very briefly. As I mentioned, the public safety parcel tax generates between $3.5 and $4 million in revenue for the city that we are very dependent on. This will sunset next year. And so we will be working on making sure that the council and the community understand the impact of these monies and how far this money goes to making sure that San Marino delivers public safety services that are the best in the region, if not the state of the world. Our police and fire services, I can say, will outrun anyone. We have some of the best, and it is because this community continues to fund our police and fire services through this public safety parcel tax. Absent this parcel tax, there would be some very serious conversations this council would have to have about what to do to fill that gap. $3.5 million is a little under 10% of our operating budget, our general fund budget. And so running a business, having a home, or any analogy you'd like to insert here, having a 10% reduction in your revenue stream will make you, force you to have some pretty serious conversations. So we want to make sure that the community really understands this. As part of this priority initiative, we will be proposing to have outreach and education materials throughout the year, community meetings and town halls, and there has to be several interactions with the county that our city clerk will be working on to make sure that we are filing things appropriately with our city's attorney, with our city clerk, with the county. This is one of those things that we do every few years, but it is a large lift to make sure that we do it with the community trust process. And I'll pause briefly if there are questions on this one before I turn it over to Chief Control. No questions. Chief, this next one's yours, I believe. There it is. And following Chief, it'll be Ms. Shaw.
Hopefully that stays. Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. As far as the body worn cameras, one of the few departments in this region that are not utilizing those tools. A body worn camera system will have, each officer will be wearing a camera. There's also the part of storage, there is redaction, there is transfer of data to the district attorney's office, to the courts, to our city attorney, and to other attorneys if there's discovery issues. That's all part of the system. The best thing about this program is the fact that it can have a reduction in liability, because you can either see if an officer is accused of something, if a crime occurs, especially if there's something that an officer sees that would help us in some sort of litigation or liability issue, that we do have a video documentation. It also increases the integrity of the department. So if my officer says, no, I didn't do that, this is what happened, this is how we conducted the investigation, we will have the video documentation. And then also increases the efficiency of the department and within our operations and investigative functions. The use of the video, as you know, we're using flock video, we're using video from other cameras. That kind of data really helps us solve. We've been solving some significant cases because of video data. The training of sworn and civilian members of the department, we'll be training them on what the policy is. We have a policy in place. We're reviewing that policy. The Police Executive Research Foundation and the Department of Justice recently came out with a model policy. And so we're reviewing that model policy and with ours and then others within the region to make sure that we have this policy. And we'll follow procedures, storage, and release the data when we have it. The last part of this is the education and training. It is going to be educating and training our community so that they understand why this is so important, why the officers have a camera on, what we're doing with this data, because people are concerned with privacy and other issues. So we want to make sure that everybody clearly understands what it is. If we are to have an incident, a critical incident, We'll make sure that within a certain amount of time, usually 10 days, sometimes a little more, depending upon the advice of council, that we would be able to release the information to the public that reduces concerns, or if we do make a significant mistake, we're letting people know what happened. And that is important for the transparency within law enforcement today. And obviously the other city departments, because their officers are going to show up with these cameras on. And they're going to be on most of the time. We do have time that we can turn them off, especially during some delicate investigations or some time where we just don't leave it there. We want to make sure everybody within the city family and within the community understands. Any questions?
This will be all vetted through the Public Safety Commission first?
Yes.
Okay. And second of all, will they be TikTok compliant? So.
I'll have to ask my wife. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief Infanta. I so appreciate that, we're going forward with a lot of technology to support our, police officers as well as the public and, our community, the safe as it can be. But, I'm aware, and I'm sure you're even more so, of all the controversy going on at LAPD, concerning their body worn cameras. And, it's not just a particular division, it ends up, it's like 4 or 5 of the divisions that are being investigated. Because of issues, whether they're on or they're off, it is up to the officers to determine, and then how that camera footage, if you will, is being reviewed by supervisors. And it has turned into, my understanding, quite a significant workload, both for the supervisors, including an information technology division that now stores it and has to produce it, and has not really changed any behavior. The reports of complaints from civilians or controversies have not changed in any way. I am not sure whether the liabilities, lawsuits and accusations, false or true, have changed. So this to me is something particularly at this time seems like a double-edged sword, because right now they're reevaluating their camera policy at the LAPD. And I know that there are other organizations that also are doing so. So I appreciate that you there's going to be a model policy out there, but again, it's all in the application and the use here on the ground. When an emergency happens, are we capturing the first seconds before they turn it on if it's a quickly developing situation, or are we implicating issues with members of the public that we don't yet foresee? So in my mind, it's problematic because there are so many issues and we have so many things confronting our department right now, including hiring and filling those positions and retaining officers, as well as continuing to focus on safety issues, which is the first priority, actually on the ground safety. And I'm worried about the public safety tax. I think as city manager brought up, it's a lot of money that helps you do your job, and we could provide public service, both fire and police, a lot. But I just don't know if this is a time where this, which will take a tremendous amount of resources and time and probably personnel changes and additional burdens, whether we need to do it now, this year, until we know where we stand on a number of those issues more clearly. So I'm just wondering, is this an initiative, I guess, big picture wise, that now is the time to add it to next year?
Great question. Technology is not a panacea. Just like writing traffic citations to everyone for speeding is not the panacea for the safety of our community. That's why we have engineering and education. You're correct in most of what you were discussing. However, and I do agree with you, it is going to be more labor intensive. It is going to cause the sergeants to do more with reviewing and auditing. And that's a critical component of a supervisor's duty. It's a critical component of management and my team. And with the addition of the management analyst, that will be someone who can also help us with some of that workload. The two incidents in particular of why this is important. When we had our first DUI, driving under the influence task force, we had a complaint of misconduct of racial bias. We also had a complaint of a traffic stop. We put in a lot of time and effort in investigating both of those complaints. Very pleased to say that our officers were in compliance with our policy in both of those instances. But having the camera would have resolved those situations within a matter of days. The policy, when you mention LAPD officers not turning on their cameras or turning them off, oh yeah, there is that. There's that everywhere. But here we have a policy, and this is when you will use them. The sergeants, the commander, myself, will ensure that our officers are following that policy. And we will either do that through education or discipline. That's an important step. This is a tool that puts us in the 20th century, not the 21st century of policing, but in the 20th century of policing. I made this request several years ago, and I brought it to public safety. Mr. Gene Ramirez, a significant litigator in police-related issues, was on the board. And at the time of the Public Safety Commission, at the time, he was not in favor of it. Mr. Ramirez is in favor of this, is in favor of the use of body-worn cameras. And we also understand that it gives a perspective from here. An officer is doing this. So the education part of it also includes people understanding, my officers in the community, that what you're getting is a viewpoint of the camera. But there's also verbal information. My wife is a detective with LAPD. She utilizes body-worn camera data every single day on every one of the cases. And for her, she has 100, 120 cases a month, along with 20 plus arrests that she has to do. But she uses that data and it makes her job much more efficient and much more accurate. And she's been able to gain filings because of the use of this data.
What was that? I'm sorry, what was the word you said?
Filings, so she charges filed against a defendant. It, to me, is the right time. We are going to be funding it through existing COPS fund, not the general fund. So that's helpful. It's spaced out over a 5-year period. You've looked at 3 different companies. Probably this week coming up, or actually today when I talk to Commander Tebbets, I'm going to make a selection and bring that selection to the Public Safety Commission and explain to them, this is why we're picking this one company and these are the other things. And they've made one company has been very generous and causes us to lead that way. They also have great redaction software, and also the service for departments is incredible. So I'm looking and making sure not just that my camera's working and that it's on, but I also am looking at long-term maintenance of the product. I'm looking at customer service. I'm looking at guarantees and many other things. Policy is extremely important. And I truly believe in this. I remember doing a project on in-car video back in 1994 for LAPD when I was a staff researcher as a sergeant. And we were first looking at a camera with a VHS tape recorder in the trunk of the car. And just how critical that use of the data was at that time in 1994. It was horrible stuff when we look at it. But that's why I really believe in this, and I know it's going to make us even better. But great question. I really truly appreciate it.
Can I just add a follow-up in? Man,
Yes, please.
I think. For example, let's take the allegations regarding racial stereotyping. Did we have to put the officer on leave until such time as it was determined?
No, not on that one.
Okay, but there are times when we have to put them on leave.
Yes.
And do you think that the use of cameras will reduce that and the associated costs of the city of putting people on leave? Seems like you'll have a quicker decision.
Yes.
It will be significant, do you think? Or I guess it depends upon.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. It depends upon what the allegation
It
is.
depends upon the allegations, it depends upon the situation. But I can tell you that there have been times that when we have a investigation that if I'm able to review the video data, it makes it cuts down on the time frame, helps the investigators, and may in the future, if we have a certain type of complaint from the public, that we'd be able to resolve it right away. And being able to hear the dialogue between the community member and the officer. The officer said something they shouldn't have done, boom, we're done. We're gonna move through that investigation. Also, if it is proven through not only the video, but the audio part of the information, the data, then we can also resolve that quickly. So it reduces the time of administrative tasks, of having a sergeant interview all witnesses. And we can really compact it and make it concise.
What's the POA's opinion?
In favor, we've already discussed it.
Advice.
I just, the last point that you brought up, and I know that's an issue, ongoing, because the body camera policy for the LAPD was changed, I believe, in August, as part of their labor negotiations. And I'm wondering, then, is that going to affect our own negotiations? Is that something that the city negotiates with the officers? And how that affects us, because we are in contract negotiations, we've never dealt with body camera policy language as a negotiating and issue for our city.
I believe I'll get this right, but Lizette's right behind me to back me up on this. When we're talking about a negotiation, a meet and confer on a policy matter that changes how we do business, we do that outside of the negotiations for salary, benefits, and working conditions. That can be something that's ongoing. For example, a beard policy. That was discussed with the Police Officers Association outside of a normal negotiation. How's that?
Thank you, that just brought up something else, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So, and just another quick question. So besides the body worn camera plans, are our police vehicles all equipped with the cameras as well? And are they always on when they're on duty?
The in-car video is each one of our 7 patrol cars has cameras. They actually have front facing and rear facing inside the vehicle. They are on when we activate our lights or our lights and siren and make a traffic stop when they are in pursuit. And we use that data when we're evaluating pursuits. And if there are any issues with the traffic stop. So we have that. The fallibility of the in-car video is it points straight forward. And it doesn't necessarily have a wider span. There's newer cameras and there's newer software that does that. Because we all know that when an officer makes a traffic stop, they don't always stay with the vehicle, and something may happen where we have to bring the officer outside along the sidewalk, is a violator along the sidewalk, or if we're conducting a investigative stop for a crime. So they're not always directly in front of them. But with the body camera, we didn't have a second set. And with all of the systems, if you have the same company with the camera, vehicle camera, and a body worn camera, they integrate with each other. This system doesn't have it. We have 3 years left on our current program. And because of efficiencies right now, we're moving forward with body camera. And then within 3 years or 2 years, we'll be able to then maybe pair up, marry up the technology with what companies.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Here, I was, working as I'm assuming by the nods on the previous slide, you're supportive of keeping priority initiatives, the priority initiative, the public safety parcel tax in our list. The one thing that we'd like to do is just pause after everyone to see if there is a consensus from the council, to continue this down to the next process, costing everything else, so we bring it back as part of the budget process. So,
Do we have any support from the council?
yeah, that's on the parcel tax. Okay, and now I'll leave it to you all for discussion on this body worn camera item.
Okay, all right, there is support from the council, this item. Okay. Yes.
And we'll continue to explore this and bring it back before the council for consideration.
Yes.
The next item before you is our traffic implementation of our traffic safety recommendation. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you and good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. For this presentation, I wanted to speak to the Adjourned traffic circulation report, which is the long awaited and we are anticipating bringing forward to the council next month. So as part of that report, once it's presented, I anticipate we'll have clearer direction on what we may or may not be proceeding with out of the recommendations for potential implementation. And from that, we could see a mixture of CIP requests and policy development. Included in that report, which we'll see next month, are some potential intersection improvements that we'll be looking for direction on. And they're what I'm classifying as citywide traffic safety improvements, so report cost quick fixes. I would characterize it that way. They're more best practices or even requirements, and a few of those are highlighted here for updating traffic signal timings to include the red phase, installing new caltrans reflective backplate on signal heads, implementation of retrofitted programs for all of our regulatory signs, which is a requirement of the uniform traffic control devices. So those are a few things you will see next month. I did want to highlight that we do have our neighborhood traffic calming funding that's available as part of this current fiscal year's budget. That was in there prior to me joining the city, and it was predicated on potentially being used as part of the outcome that on some of the recommendations that came out of that report. And so no money has been spent from that budget this current fiscal year, and it will be pending what comes out of that meeting next month. And some of the items I just mentioned under this exact citywide traffic safety improvements could be funded through that. It probably wouldn't fully cover the cost, particularly of the reflective back plates, those traffic signal heads, as we have a number of intersections and those do get costly, but of course it could be a phase of implementation if we move forward with that. So I did want to highlight that funding is available there, and as part of this priority initiative, it could be a continuation of that CIP. And you would potentially put additional funding there to cover whatever comes out of the next month's meeting. Aside from that, as city manager, as I already spoke to, we do have our citywide traffic improvements priority initiative that was part of this year's budget with $150,000 that was appropriated. I do anticipate, based on the update that was already provided, that we will spend most of that between the school zone evaluation that's currently ongoing. We expect that report in March. And then the implementation of all of our updates to the school zone areas and the speed radar sign. We will probably spend majority of that money on that current initiative, but this initiative could be again expanded to a continuation for a future year based on the results of that report. So this is really to address those items as city manager also alluded to, we do have obviously the residential streets traffic management policy that will be presented. And associated with that, how we would address the resident, traffic safety concerns that have come to us and having funding available to study and make improvements based upon whatever will come out of this independent traffic reviews of smaller locations. So that concludes my report or my presentation on this item.
Any comments?
So I know, thank you, Director. I know that we've been kind of running circles around this traffic calming and traffic. Is there something we need to do fundamentally in terms of the scope that Adjourned has? Because when we look at these two, right, we're talking about traffic calming and then we're talking about traffic improvement. And I noticed through all the previous meetings with them, they're focused on traffic improvement. That's the primary scope before we provided them, which really conflicts with a lot of the traffic calming that our community members are trying to put front and center.
Yes.
So, yeah, I feel we can move for the year. Needs to change with their scope.
Well, at this point, their report is predominantly complete. It was mostly complete before I even got here. We have a complete draft. There, you know, and as I present this next month, I will speak to that there probably some disconnect in the scoping and what was probably desired outcomes of the report. So I will be addressing that as part of next month's report to help clarify, you know, from my perspective, from what I think the community is looking for and what, and to get your input on what you would like to see in the community, what those recommendations would include or not. So I'm not necessarily saying, oh, let's budget for all the improvements that they're recommending. So that's gonna be another discussion next month, and that would come back, the outcome of that would come back as part of this initiative, what we decide to move forward with or not. And then obviously aside from that would just be how we address some of these issues going forward, independent of the outcome of that report. So how we would fund, just be able to address our residential neighborhoods and the complaint concerns that come from them through the new policy that we're developing.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if we can get more use out of this consulting service versus just saying, this is the report that's given to us, and then we'll figure out how to work it. So I don't know if there's a way we, you know what I mean, public safety or us as a city can provide maybe even a master overlay or something with specific zones, maybe we clarify, hey, this is traffic calming and this is traffic improvement versus picking them one by one. Simply with the recommendations and then just shuttling some way and actually look at some others.
Well, I wouldn't say they're mutually exclusive, in terms of safety and traffic calming.
Sure.
And obviously traffic improvements.
Sure.
They kind of all are, you know, they're interrelated, so there's some things that we would recommend that may help traffic, but would also provide safety benefits to the community. And not be geared solely on trying to get traffic through. And I know that was obviously one of the concerns. Are we just trying to move traffic or are we trying to put in measures that don't necessarily hinder traffic, but that make our community safer? And so finding that balance and understanding, you know, what is the most appropriate solution or if the solution is even necessary in some of the locations that they've recommended. So we will have to take a holistic look at the entire program after the conclusion of this report. And as to your point, as part of the policy that we're developing would be to say, you know, how are we gonna approach these? What's the process? What are the measures that we think would be appropriate when it's needed and where? That would be outside of that report. So.
Thank you. Just hoping it could be more as supportive as possible.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Actually, just one real quick question. A few years ago, when I was on traffic advisory mission, there was one of the issues that always often brought by the residents was that during the traffic hours, because of certain traffic acts like these. They usually would reroute them into residential areas instead of where, the major road is all jammed up. And they're trying to do, well, at least go to that, those companies try to see if something can be done, not to rerouting them into residential area. I'm not sure if that has changed, or is that still an issue that people during rush hours, they will be rerouted if they're using.
I think they have to still do
So
throughout the
there's nothing.
neighborhoods. I haven't explored, I have to do some research on whether or not. There's anything that we could, recommend, or any way, if there's any avenues to help influence the routes, but to my knowledge, at this point, there isn't, and it does something so, especially these things, so.
Wesley.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. I think couple things. One, we already did a deep dive, I think 3 of us here at least, in October of, oh my gosh, 2022, we had a full evening, maybe it was where we really devoted ourselves to looking at the ITERIS report in the first version and trying to direct them, because they had a lot of things that clearly weren't appropriate. They used, I think, community members came and spoke and had done some research, both from SMPD and their traffic enforcement. And so out of that came, that they were focusing on the wrong areas, not exclusively, there are problems, a couple, but then there were some strange recommendations that had more the attention of a few people, and instead of were either backed up by accidents or traffic stops, that type of thing, unsafe driving. And so, and then the task force was sort of our answer, that the terrace would take back. We would have a traffic task force of people in the community who were knowledgeable or interested, but to talk through and try to refocus that document so we get something more useful, and also prioritize what the ideas were and the money and the cost involved. And it seems like none of that has happened on the terrace's part, but the task force did do a lot of work with you and with, I believe, the chiefs. And there was a very good discussion among quite a large task force that came, and a lot of information. For example, they had an Excel spreadsheet that they shared from the San Marino Police Department, for a 16-month period, where it talked about the top locations of accidents and non-injury, and also the top number of stops, or problem areas. So they were like San Marino Avenue, Lorraine, Virginia and Lorraine, San Gabriel and Lorraine, Del Mar, anyway, etc. So you can look back at that, and I know the community's aware of that, as well as accident areas on Huntington and some of the cross streets that have been recurring problems. So I think there's a focus that we could do. My question to you is, with following, I know that we have the terrace report and we've paid them a lot, but they've never changed their analysis to deal with new locations that came up. Am I correct in that? Or is a new version, let's say a terrace 2.0, 3.0 now, what version we're on, have they added any intersections and done any analysis based upon actual San Marino Police Department reports? And are they focused and have changed and given us some recommendations about those?
I will have to go back and compare the original report to the final report. They did, to my understanding, they did make some changes to recommendations to add. They still limit, there was 5 locations, 5 intersections that they had identified at the time I first saw the report. From community input and the associated reviews with the Public Safety Commission, the County Task Force, staff involvement. They did remove one of the locations because there was it just was not a fit for the community, and there was a strong opposition to it. And it was very clear that just was not going to be something that should even stay in the report. And so they noted that removal of that item from the report, and that would have been removed from the traffic city that they were proposing that. And so that has been removed from the report. There's still 4 intersections that they have identified in the report. again, when I present next month, I'll get more in depth into what the public safety had recommended, some public safety had recommended, what the capital task force recommendations in regards to local locations are, and for staff recommendations as well, as to what would be appropriate to do with those recommendations. I still think, like, to your point, that there are locations in there that they have recommendations, they are conceptual, I will say that, they haven't been fully analyzed. And I wouldn't say they're necessarily scoped to do a full analysis of every intersection to that level. But there are recommendations in there that I wouldn't necessarily support, and we'll get to that when we do the full presentation. And then they do give just in general some guidelines and improvements and those, you know, like I mentioned, they're included up here as some of the traffic safety improvements are important and should be implemented, but to your point, there are some conversation we'll need to have about their other recommendations, so.
And is there, I guess, any way, again, we have, the city has spent a significant amount of money on this. And I don't know if, also there are, I'm sure, liability issues. I appreciate, you know, that the report is then out there, and if we accept it as a public document, I don't know how that affects us. I expect we'll hear more about that next month. But generally about can we as a city focus on intersections that have increased number of accidents associated with them, and focus on those and the school zones, which is a separate issue, which may involve hopefully metro money and what we need to do. And I appreciate that the cameras are coming, but when we really just base ours on the actual data that our police department provides, or state, whatever transportation, right? I know there's an acronym, and you can say it better than I can. But there's very independent things that should help guide us in this process. If we're really serious about traffic safety, then those are the areas that should generate financial commitment on our part. And so can you help produce or give us those, that we have something to operate on, instead of it shouldn't be generated by this report or other one-offs, if you will.
Correct. So my plan was essentially to, well, one, hopefully bring the entire support to a conclusion, whatever that may be with the council. So that we can
circular file that they can.
that we can say, yes, we agree with, no, we don't agree with, or we need to verify and move on, whatever that recommendation ultimately decision is. And then from that point, we can move forward with looking at the Metro 710 obviously is a big part of that for Huntington. There are a number of improvements, and we've already been alluded to. So looking at it as a whole picture of how does that impact what we're gonna do overall? It doesn't make sense to go and do one-off things, knowing that there's a larger project that we need to be planning for. But there are other, obviously, streets and intersections that are on Huntington per se, that probably warrant some further study or improvements if necessary. And so, yeah, I can help go through that information and put together a much more clear picture of what's about from direction from that meeting, and what that would look like going forward to be considered as part of the budget process.
And I think I listened to Public Safety Commission, and you talked about spoke to Transtech, who we have an ongoing relationship with, and I think
Yes,
you're confident in their work. I mean, they're data driven in terms of how they test intersections and monitor speeds and that type of thing, or frequency of travel. Again, I'm not saying the right term, I'm in traffic expert language, but they're more who we have gone to and we're still working with along some of the problematic sections of our streets.
yes, so anything that would come out of recommendations wise out of whether it's my heritage report or otherwise,
Like the traffic task force, right?
Yeah.
Or Public Safety Commission.
yeah, so any recommendations that came out of traffic task force, public safety commission, anything that may or may not be implemented through or considered through this report would ultimately go back to Transtech for further analysis and implementation if depending on what those their reviews.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes. So I just want to highlight, I think, from my understanding from seeing the reports and scopes, I don't think, my personal belief is not, Terrace is not getting it. I think we really are setting them on the wrong path. So I think we need to revisit, potentially, if you can look at the scope. It seems like the traffic flow is really what they focused on. I don't know if that's their contracted scope. But that essentially, it seems like we've giving them a different prompt, we're cherry picking from answers. And so that's what I'm kind of suggesting, we can kind of go back and look at that scope.
Yeah, so the citywide traffic regulation study, the primary purpose and analysis associated with that, they do look at traffic volume.
Yeah.
Levels of service at the intersections, whether it's signalized or stop, what are the waiting times, how is traffic flowing through those locations, and then also that really is, I mean, what they were scoped for.
Right.
And what they were intended to review, and from that. There would be some safety things they would consider at those locations, but
Not sort of best.
that's not necessarily how it would be prioritized, and I think they did try to shift midway through when they got through the process. You know, unfortunately, I wasn't here, I can't speak to everything that happened prior to me coming to the city. At this point, I think it's, you know, it's not entirely their fault, but the report that we have is more or less complete, you know, they've expended all their time and effort and thought that we put into it, so to go back. And just knowing the history of how we've gotten here, it doesn't seem like it would be beneficial to go back to them and have them make any changes per se. I think we would want to just rely on our judgment and our on-call traffic engineers who are obviously very familiar with the community, they've been here for a long time, and they can, you know, assess some of those recommendations with us if we decide we want to further study anything. To come to a conclusion, if the recommendations they made warrant further consideration, and we agree that there's some issue there, and maybe what Iter's proposed was not or was the right solution, you know, they can help us come to those, or if it's something else that maybe there's something warranted there, but if it's not, we don't like what was proposed and don't think it's a good fit, and maybe there's something that's a better fit in the city. That would still address the issue, so that's kind of what I see coming out of this, is we would say, we've done our due diligence, we've reviewed their recommendations, and we'll take it from there and move forward. Unfortunately, just based on the fact that the report was already 100% complete, so rather than spending more money on a report that has
Take it once. Take it once and it's one.
I think we would rather spend it with.
Yeah.
So, and following up with the Chevron and also customers' comments. When the report was first brought to the public safety last year, I remember the reference they were based on was even using New York City traffic guideline at that time. That's why the result was totally almost become a one not to do this
Right.
for our city. It almost became we all feel like we just don't do anything they say, then we're fine, that kind of. So during the 2.0, 3.0, did they change the reference to a more local?
Or state,
Yeah, state.
There was a number of sources referenced in their report. The one that you're referring to is NACDO, so the national standard that organization is based out of New York, but it's not solely a New York organization. They actually do a lot of programming across the country, and so I wouldn't say this that they were making specific recommendations based off New York standards for our community. But of course, they are using local, you know, I know you were capital Viking, which is a national, but they're the California version of it. Obviously, they use our California agency, not relying on the national standard. And so there was a combination of factors that sources they relied on in the recommendation they were making. And I would say it was all New York. That's
And hopefully they get what scope would be information, their purpose is to increase the traffic flow in our town, calming the traffic in neighborhood around, so I hope they make some adjustments in that.
They didn't, I would say any of the recommendations that came out that would increase traffic flows to the community at this point. I mean, there's no significant structural changes to what they were recommending that would bring traffic to the area. It was more just trying to move the traffic that we're doing here that we like or don't like having in the community, obviously, in helping get it through the community, but they're not. The focus and on recommendations and see were to bring more.
Circulation, so they're trying to improve the traffic circulation in certain neighborhoods, but that may not be what.
Right, but also recommendations, most of them, because there was some feedback, I believe, from the council and commission. Most of the recommendations now wouldn't say any of those are so much circulation improvements. It was them trying to shift to make some more safety-based recommendations, not all of them necessarily warranted in those locations without a full analysis. But they did try to make that shift in the report and from what I can see. But still needs some vetting and determining whether they are really the recommendations, because they tried to shift from going from a circulation improvement recommendation to more, well, let's try and fix some safety problems we think may be here or not.
Are we, is the ITER's newest version available to the public? Because there are a lot of people interested in this issue and would like to see that they fix that, some of the concerns and some of the data that was wrong, the guidelines that they might have brought in from other jurisdictions, so to speak, that didn't comply with California or our own whatever traffic fixes, if you will, and guidelines for the state and for the county or et cetera. I know we have really specific things. For any of those changes, or when will people get to see this document? Is it finished?
It is essentially finished for what we're gonna bring forward, the final drafts to council. It was attached in the Public Safety Commission reports that were presented. The last version was presented in March of 23. I think there were some minor edits to it following that meeting, so I think the latest version is now in April. Incorporating some minor tweaks and finalization of the report. Last few weeks after that meeting took place. That will be included as an attachment to next month's report for the public review, and if it's not on the website, we can certainly put it up there sooner.
Yeah, because it does have a lot of data points that were problematic.
Yeah, I don't think there were significant changes between the March and April version, but we can certainly post it.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
It's available with plenty of time for our review performance.
Thank you.
So I don't know if this is for director or manager, so for future learning, so we don't say we waste all this time and money on that. David, how do we in dealing with participants all this?
Well, I mean.
Right, like so B2 is better.
My objective would be to have a clearer scope. That has buy-in from the council and the public safety commission, that we all understand.
Right.
I think we are scoping, and if there is,
We do need to make David
if there, if we would have
with some process.
an opportunity, well, it would be, there should have been, and I'm assuming that wasn't here, but there were intermediate submittals of that report. I don't know if that happened, but typically there would be progress submittals, at least to staff level. Maybe obviously may not have presented the full report at the commission or the public or council. But it's really important for staff to.
Director Shaw is sitting on that, so she's on this custom show. This isn't coming on us as city staff working more closely with all of you as council members. So what we've learned from this process, and then for my time as well, but that's no reason or excuse for us not to learn from this, that as soon as we hear the temperature or see the temperature rising on us, number one, scope it appropriately, work on scope with all of you as the policymakers. Number two, keep an eye on that scope and have a better relationship with the contractor or the consultant working on that. And number three, these periodic check-ins that the Director Shaw Commission need to be better between myself and all of you, directors and myself, all of us as staff and the commission. So we own this as staff, whether it's staff that are here or are not here today. We own the pulse check and everything else that we need to do on this. We need to keep a better eye on this. We need to have our ear to the ground in the community a little bit better. So we've learned a lot from this. But we're gonna do better.
In that regard, so my recollection is that we consistently asked for, and staff as well, asking for something from Criteris. But we didn't get anything. I recall maybe every other meeting, someone would mention, where's the traffic report? Now, it was during COVID, granted, but a lot of people still work through COVID. So I don't want to use COVID as an excuse for this, but I do believe it's that communication element that in making sure that they understand that they're under contract to deliver something, and whether that contract included reports on a regular basis, I can recall. But this was something of a headache for council as well. And I think it comes down with communication and cooperation from the Iteris.
You're absolutely right, Councilman Saul. We'll work on this. We've learned a lot from this. And so that is why this is before you as a priority. We've learned a lot and we continue to have a lot to do. Once this report is before you again, it's going to be before you in the next 4 weeks to put really a fine point on this report and then move on and more importantly, move forward with continuing to chip away at such an important policy decision.
So, yeah, appreciate it. So not specific to this, but let's say we do contract consultants for a specific job and scope. And then we want to change that scope midway. Does that come back to count? Yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand what that process entails if we do completely change scope. I want the city's going to recommend.
Yeah, I think it depends upon where the direction is coming from in terms of the scope. Right? So if the scope is being directed by, Public Works, if they need a study to do a particular project or figure out how to do a particular project, and that scope is developed by Public Works Director and something happens and we need to change the scope, then that's probably something that doesn't need to rise to the level of the council. But if the council is receiving a presentation on the study that staff believes is important for the community and you guys approve the scope of that, staff's not going to change the scope of that without coming back.
Thank you. Any other questions of public? Any requests for public comments?
No, we don't have any.
Do you have any councilor who do not support moving this item forward?
I'm gonna say I don't support moving the Iteris report forward in any way. Given that they probably have not changed and there was sensitive issues from the data to the scope. And they never made any recommendations about the traffic. I mean, so it became something entirely different. And I appreciate the city manager and Director Shaw coming in after the fact and trying to make something out of nothing useful. How about that? So I would rather move forward with this traffic. I think we have excellent public safety commission recommendations, and those have been vetted and heard by you as well as police chief, and I believe both chiefs, and as well as traffic task force, which is kind of that subgroup. And I would really like to see those come forward to the council, and that should be what we act on, and not color our discussion anymore with Iteris issues, because it is a law document. But they didn't correct it and they're not going to at this point. It's more problematic, but however we go about that, I feel strongly that the community has waited now for several years. COVID included, so at least 4 years now, I'm sorry, 2.5 years now, going on 3, that we need to do something about public safety. and move forward in certain areas that we can clearly identify that have been researched and thoroughly discussed. So I would like to see us do that with the funds available and come forward additionally. If you think beyond the couple of recommendations here that the citywide traffic safety improvements that we can start now, but if we need additional funding to do some of those other projects, then I expect that will be something that will be part of the 2024 budget, and I hope we can do that with problematic issues. Thank you.
Yeah, move forward.
Yes. Yes, do we take a break or next time?
I'm gonna get
So, let's take a 5 minutes break, so.
This will come right back up on the screen for you in a second. But the three here consist of a discussion around the general plan update, completing our housing element update, and continuing to plan for the future of Stone. And all three of these items, these are multi-year heavy lift priority initiatives. All three of these will now be spoken to by Community Development Director Figueroa. And Mr. Boone will advance the slide here.
Good morning, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members, thank you for the opportunity to update you on a few of the major endeavors that the community development department is currently undertaking. With the general plan, in essence, that's already started with the housing element and the previous staff efforts to update the safety element, so we'll continue that. When I first started, there were applications for the general plan steering committee. And because of pressing matters, we had to stop that effort temporarily, and we're in a position where we could start that effort again. We're gonna reopen the applications most likely in March. Previous applicants don't have to reapply, they'll still be considered. Hopefully we'll get more applications to really get a wider perspective in terms of how to move forward in the future with the city goals. We'll also be working with our community engagement manager to continue community engagement, website update, resume mailer, and whatever else we can do to both for the participation in general plan update for the community. I'm available for any questions. Any question?
So what do you see as the scope and how, I understand that, I know that public safety elements been updated in large part, and the housing element we're currently working through with the state department. And I understand that there's some significant other elements that are now required to be part of our general plan that are new to our city. Can you give us an idea of how many of those are and what we'll have a consultant we've
Yes.
already contracted with? Okay.
So great question. There are 9 elements. There used to be 7. Now there's 9. We will have an RFP for a consultant. I can tell you right now that $600,000 most likely will not be enough. However, obviously we're working for a certification of our housing elements, so that will be completed. I believe there's been a significant amount of work already accomplished with the safety element. So either that will be brought before you as a separate element, or it will be part of general plan update as a whole. And so the idea would be an RFP, a consultant will help us out. In my previous work, it was a comprehensive general plan update, also involved the zoning ordinance update as well. That is not contemplated in this. Obviously, we'll bring that forward if we feel that it's required. But it's currently funded at $600,000, most likely will be more, but we'll get to that as we move forward.
And the scope of the time, the length of time that this will take, assuming, is it a 2-year process? Is it a 1-year process? Just to get an idea for the community of what their commitment might be and what they can expect.
If the zoning ordinance update is not included, because I would include it. If it's not included and we just have to update it to make sure we're consistent with the general plan, I would say 1.5 years. We're looking at about 1.5 years after.
And we have, okay, and just about the zoning, we have zoning updates to do because of the housing now.
Yes.
So it's done, what we need to do in our city will be coming up when we get to the final phase of the housing element, have to put zoning changes
Correct.
codified in law, so to speak.
Correct, so we would have to make the appropriate zoning ordinance and zoning map updates corresponding to whatever we do with the housing element. When you have a general plan update, that typically requires you to also amend your zoning ordinance if they have to be consistent.
Right.
So depending on what policy changes are made, those are commensurate with whatever changes you make.
I see. So it's one and the same that we would choose for both. All right,
Correct.
thank you.
And so we don't have any number, according Rena, so under SB6, we don't have any of those number calculated, right? On sequence or nothing. We're going to wait for your folks. Thank you.
2 questions. One is, can planning commission be on the general plan commission?
Members of the planning commission
Can answer. And then second question is, what kind of sets the table on this? I mean, it could get pretty. I mean, we could get pretty flexible, right? So like, do we as a city set some parameters outside of just the policy? Does the consultant kind of set the table on this, or is the general?
Multifaceted, so obviously there's state laws that we have to comply with, so we
Right.
work around those.
Right.
That's your baseline, then it's what the goal and vision of the community, and that's where its general plan steering committee. Starts to lay out the vision. Looking at what we have adopted and what we feel needs to be done in the future, preserve. And plan out based on new state laws and so forth. And then ultimately it's your responsibility.
Yeah, so we're really thinking about like committee, currently set. Thank you.
If I might add, Councilman Show, the later in your agenda item, you have the council delegates and alternates list, and the general plan updates delegate is Vice Mayor Shepherd Romney, and with the alternates, Councilman Hall. So this is your assistance to that all.
Any other questions?
Please. And I'll give a good pivot to discuss the housing element update. Obviously, the city council authorized a consulting contract. We were working with our consultant and we've been speaking with HC staff. Those conversations have been constructive. We're currently finalizing the internal draft. Obviously, we'll get like to you as soon as it's ready. We'll conduct a community outreach to get input from the community, and that also be with public hearings. And we hope to have the housing element inclusive of the implementation meaning zoning. Basically, we have to do by spring for this. Any questions?
Does since we do not have a final version, are we still considered in compliance? Do you have an understanding of where we are in terms of our, maybe that's a city attorney, but Director Figueroa, I know you're fully aware and working with the state as well as our new consultant. So where do we stand in terms of our action of our city, if you will?
So the argument we would make is that we're in substantial compliance. I will say that there are a couple of cities who have made that argument already unsuccessful. So it's the sooner we can get this done, the better off.
Will we have a chance of a moratorium?
Yeah, a moratorium on housing is almost impossible to do.
Thank you, that's fine. And again, a good pivot to the next item, which is on the campus. Our housing element identified the site, specifically the 1.66 vacant site, as a site for meeting our housing needs allocations. The site and the amenity are conducive for a senior living project. We feel that by providing housing to our San Marino senior population, that could help facilitate certification of the housing element while also help maintain both the neighborhood community and preserve the values of the city. Also with that, you also have the recreational opportunities that the existing Stillman School can provide. Now, with in conjunction with the senior living project, that could be something that, you know, you can have senior living facility. We would look into a public-private partnership to both construct the senior living and manage the school site for recreational opportunities, or the city can do that through our community services department. We were obviously engaged the community on this idea and hopefully include this in the housing element that we hope to submit by September this year. Any questions?
Actually, it's more a recommendation comes actually it was approached by, looking at the recreational opportunities, actually was approached by some residents in town about pickleball courts. Because I guess it's getting a lot of popularity these days, and it's good for to pick up for all ages. And then so personally, actually I was beaten because I wanted to try house, and I was beaten by a duo of 83 and 85-year-old. Like there's so I figured this.
That's on you, Cal.
So
DC to 85?
So,
Getting closer.
since I was approached by quite a few, residents in town, I'm just, exploring whether, it's easy to come, because one tennis court can build active, it will convert into 4 people, and it doesn't have to be permanent either, so it can be besides just a possibility of that to explore. There's can be one of the, and then, so everybody can participate into.
And that's a great point. I think, that reminds me, this is a project that, obviously. Community development is overseeing the housing element function of it, but you also have functions where public works will have to intervene, community services. So this is really a group effort, moving forward in whatever the city council decides to do with Stone.
Since this has sort of people in the community have discussed the senior aspect of the housing, I think that there's some interest in. Community is understanding that we need to think about housing, using that as some type of housing allotment, to fulfill one of our weak areas. But people communicated that we have a lot of seniors, so great, but we also need to focus on maybe first-time families or those other things. And I still don't understand the terminology of the missing middle, which in our housing element, whatever that magic phrase is, but we had some issues, I believe, from the state that our housing doesn't naturally support many, subgroups that they want us to address. And so I just want to make sure if we are going to use this, go forward and consider using the Stoneman campus, so to speak, for one of those things that we need. It wasn't so much that we need help in senior housing, although I completely understand and that might be a wonderful use. We have a lot of senior housing people who are living extended time in their homes there, but so services for them is key to our city. But we also need to focus on whether it's new family, first time buyers, do something. I don't know what those things are that we also have a weakness in that maybe we need to address. For the long term, but we are looking at this as a long-term facility, obviously it would be. Then what are those things that are our weakest areas, if you will, or the ones that we don't address yet within our city, and the state is going to require us to go forward, because I think we need to take a look at some of those things, and if we say housing, then what's the housing need to be, and not necessarily perhaps what we already have a significant community of.
These are great points, and obviously we included a senior facility here just as an example, just because it's conducive to it.
Sure.
But in terms of the demographics that you just mentioned, those are obviously targeted families that we're looking at in terms of how we can facilitate housing, and this site could be conducive to something of that nature as well. We're hopefully we'll bring something forward to you that hopefully has the support not only this council, but the community at large. So we'll do our best to filter those out.
Right, and we even talked about, I think, or one of the areas too, that some cities are doing is even housing for staff, like have an opportunity for staff that wouldn't otherwise be able to live in the area. And again, I don't know how you actually put that through on a housing site, but how that might be. So I think we should be open-minded and maybe look at other projects. It is a small site anyway, but other projects that might answer some of those things where we don't have, haven't addressed that demographic issue, and we'll require you by the state.
And that's a great point. Staff housing was also part of the previous cycle. That's not, obviously has not
Been fulfilled or whatever.
has not developed into anything, but the teachers. Obviously haven't given them the opportunity to live in the cities. The Southwestern Academy is also a potential site, housing for their staff as well, we're looking at. So I'm glad that you're mentioning these things, because these are all things that we are working with our consultant in terms of how we can facilitate.
Great.
But at the same time, continue the tradition of maintaining this in.
Yes, thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Which is following up with that, so during public hearings, please also include school district, like last time, about overlay zone, for example. I would actually like to reopen it out. I spoke with some other some people from other cities, including this member, actually having staff housing, which can qualify as other members in school side, help them to retain and attract good teachers in their school district. Like, so that's actually a good, because, good, a suggestion, a good proposal, but we just have to communicate. Figure out, but work with the school district, make sure this is a common consent for.
We tried that, they rejected. And it was interesting, there was a substantial misunderstanding as to what we were trying to do, but it took a little research on their part, and but how many times do you have to knock at the door before you turn around? No, this is only a part of it. If you take a look at potential housing, you're talking about multifamily housing in certain education. So I think that all these will be considered as part of the housing element, and that's not what we're really here to discuss today. So because there's a lot of policy concerns we need to substantially put in the community.
What I can tell you though is that one, you have another cycle right around the corner. So I can tell you, I don't know much about previous efforts in terms of communication dialogue with the school district, but that would be essential as we move forward, that we will have communication with them in terms of how we move forward. But in terms of this particular housing element cycle, we obviously are concentrating to get certification as soon as possible, so we're not caught in a vulnerable position.
Thank you.
Any questions? Any other question? Appreciate it, thank you.
All right, any requests for public comments?
We do not have any.
We have support from the council. Great. Thank you. And next item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, that was support all three of Mr. Figueroa's items.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful, thank you. This next slide here, this is an important one. I'll cover these two as we get Mr. Shea settled in here. This is focusing on our fiscal health here. One of the key priorities of this council has always been to maintain a sound financial standing for the city of San Marino. Part of that rests on being able to do a regular cost of service study. We conduct these in government every 3 to 5 years to make sure that we are collecting the appropriate revenue for the services that we provide. It is tantamount to modifying your collections year over year so that you don't under collect and find yourselves in a hole that is too deep for you to dig yourself out of. So what we're asking for here is to conduct a cost of service study, understand what all of our different inputs are to the various services that we provide, and then return to this council for a final determination on where to set those costs, those fees, and different things like that. We would need to bring on an expert, a fee consultant that will do all of this analysis. Cost of service really is a robust process that takes into account direct costs, indirect costs, overhead, you name it. But it's important to make sure that we are adequately spreading the costs for service across the right customer classes. So one person isn't overpaying for one fee where another one is receiving subsidies. Any questions on this particular item? All right. The next item here, again, mission critical for us, recruiting and onboarding finance director. As Mr. Shea and I are holding down the fort for the next several months, we will be bringing on a recruitment firm to conduct a foreign-wide recruitment for a finance director that is an appropriate fit for San. The importance here is folks know how to do finance all over the world. However, knowing how to do finance in San Marino such that you are understanding of our sensitivities, of the things that are important to this community, and understanding the parameters within which we work, right, are tight revenue streams, these are property tax versus sales tax, all these different things, all the expenses. We need to find the right individual. So we're going to spend the time it takes to find this person. On top of that, we want to make sure that we bring someone in that has experience with tools, metrics, key performance indicators so that we can continue to build on that trust with our community. It may require some modifications to the way that we present our things in our comprehensive annual financial report, our budget process, my monthly city manager's metrics, all of you. but we want to make sure that we continue to build on that such that the community understands what we're doing financially. Something that I heard just this week, and it's working on things like this. Someone mentioned to me, well, the city has 80% reserves, you're doing just fine, you know, no worries. And I said, well, that's not quite the case. We don't have 80% reserves. We have a cash balance, but we maintain roughly around 40-ish% reserves. And so making sure that we work on this as a priority initiative so that the community understands our finances, their finances. It's mission critical for us. So that's why this is on here. We want to continue to build on that, particularly in a year where we are going to ask the voters for consideration of parcel tax. All of this works.
Question?
Perfect. I see support for that. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one here. This is going to be Mr. Figueroa will tee us off, and then Ms. Shaw will handle the next two. But these are three items that we're excited about because we believe these will not only be improvements in-house, but they will absolutely translate into direct improvements for the community's experience with City Hall. And vis-a-vis those improvements should, over the course of several years, and initially right off the bat with one or two of these, start to save this city some money. So, Mr. Figueroa.
Thank you. Again, this is echoing the work of our city manager. This is really a way to really be more efficient and effective to our community. Currently, our permitting system is antiquated. It takes a lot of time to get numbers, to get information out to our community, and obviously we have a demanding community, rightfully so. And our staff spends more time researching than actually interfacing with them, getting the actual information out. So it's really a detriment to the way we have to manage our workload. So obviously we want to improve permit tracking, provide real-time information on our city website. Hopefully have some tools that can alert residents where construction projects are taking place. Kind of as a first step before calling the city hall. Streamline our access to all our records, improve efficiency within our departments. You know, obviously we talk to each other a lot, and it would be a great way to hopefully have a permit system where everyone can tap in and see exactly what we all are seeing. That would also improve efficiency within our departments, improve our record maintenance. Obviously, that's a big item. And like I said, reduce staff research to, you know, focus and personalized service to our residents. So really, this is just a way to hopefully be more efficient and effective in our community. Any questions? No questions? Thank you, Senator.
Ms. Shaw will take these last two.
Thank you. So this first one, following what Director Figueroa spoke to, I would say that for the public works access management program that's being presented here, it's first off, it doesn't replace the GoGo application that you're familiar with that we have. That is a very important part of how we respond and can take care of issues that come up, because of course, you know, we're very limited staff and it can't be all places at all times. And so it is important to be able to get feedback from the community when we see something. So this would not replace that. With any luck, some of the programs I started looking at could integrate that into a full asset management program. And the importance of this is really to establish a complete inventory of all of our city assets that we have. You know, as an example, I couldn't tell you at this moment how many street signs we have in the city. Couldn't tell you when they were installed for the most part, unless they were pretty recent. When last time they were retro reflectivity tested. So really this system would help build that complete inventory, give us a complete picture of everything we have. It would help us better plan our work efforts and ensure that we are appropriately budgeting and that we're using the resources that have been appropriated to us effectively and efficiently. They will be good stewards of that money and managing and planning for it. So it would increase our staff efficiencies and effectiveness and productivity overall, because we could plan for what the next area that we need to focus on, and that we're meeting those regulations, in terms of regulatory compliance as well. Because as I mentioned earlier, the rental activity housing is a regulatory compliance issue, it's something we need to do, and I don't have anything of a document that has been done. Certainly it probably has over the years, I would hope or expect, but I don't have anything to prove that. Concurrently, it would also be important for our risk mitigation. We've spent a lot of time trying to research because GovGov does document any requests that come in. It doesn't document anything our staff does on a daily basis. So if they're out and they see something and they just take care of it, as they should, there isn't any record that they took care of something. And so we do have claims that come in or things that come up in terms of managing the risk and being able to respond and provide the backup to say, yes, we were there a week ago or a month ago, that wasn't there. I don't have that. So I think from that perspective, just in improving our overall department efficiencies, managing our risk, and being able to just better utilize our staff time and make sure that we're using our resources the best we can to maintain our city infrastructure. This would be really critical and important for our department. So that really concludes the presentation on this.
Great. Questions?
Just real quick on the city infrastructure. I remember I brought some concern the residents to you about the streetlights. And as I drove by the city, I know we if I right, we have allocated some budget for the lights replacement, but doesn't include all the light bulbs in there. Because as I drove around town, some are already updated with the new LED light bulb, and some are still like fluorescent, and they're different color temperatures all around town. Some are orange, some are still white, some are dimmer, some are brighter. Is there a plan to update the entire city with the same type of energy efficient, brighter lighting?
I would say, I think for the most part, most of our, and this applies our assets as well, we have idea working our street lighting controller cabinets are obviously in our GIS. We don't know where all of our street lights are on the plan. But those are all of our street lights have been, from my understanding, implemented into LED lights. There are obviously a small portion of the city where we don't own lights, and those are Edison lights. That could be some of the differences that you're seeing. Part of the difference would also be in the fixtures, and absolute, where you have the concrete poles with just the candle top basically on them. That's probably gonna look a little different, have a different lighting, even if it is LED versus some of the overheads, the ones that extend out over the street and come, base down. So there might be some differences in that, but ultimately, yes, you would want everything to, at least for the type of fixture would be standardized. And there might be some differences, but they should all be LED, and if it's not already implemented, and that would be part of compiling all our asset inventory of understanding what we have and what needs to still be taken care of if something did get missed, which is entirely possible, or be able to explicitly say, no, that hasn't, or if we at some point would want to look at how we can take over those areas and make sure it's all city infrastructure. So that we can have a consistent look throughout our entire community. That could be a further discussion in the future, but this would address some of that, make sure that everything is consistent, and I think has better trust, we can make sure it's.
Thank you.
Just to follow up, are you talking about developing a GIS system like the LA County has, or?
So we have a system that has layers for some of our assets in there.
Not all.
But not all of them, and even for the assets that are in there, like it'll show where a storm drain or a sewer line is. But it doesn't have attributes to actually tell us what's there, or attach any sort of maintenance records to it to say, well, we were there. We completed a cleaning last year in this location, we found this information there, we made this repair. The GIS can show us the physical locations of some of our assets. It should even have attribute data to tell you what size line, or and you have the ability to attach plans to them typically, in bigger cities, LA probably has that. That would be nice to have here. But this wouldn't replace the GIS.
I just had one follow-up to the streetlights. Certain areas of the city have different ones historically, and I know that certain neighborhoods, we even dealt with this a couple of years ago on the south of Huntington, east side of town, because there were a number of failures and we had to replace pole, et cetera, and they're a completely different style than other areas. So I believe we had a discussion in part at that time about standardizing it, but community members felt like that identified their neighborhood specifically, and so we kept it to be the historic, whatever it was there, we then matched for future in certain areas. So we don't have, it was not at all an intention and past councils anyway to change and make a standardized look. So I wanted to make sure you knew that it's already been an issue that by the last makeup of council, at least within the last 5 or 6 years, that we dealt with, that the community came out and felt strongly that there are certain historic differences that we want to preserve. Yeah, as far as the actual look, the ones that are in residential areas, I don't think it applies anywhere to any of the high volume traffic areas or anything like that, where we have to match the state guidelines, but I think that is part of it too. Was that certain areas felt very strongly that in communities, neighborhoods, that the streetlights were relevant to their architectural landscape, if you will.
Any other question? Any requests?
We do not have any.
Well, you heard this before?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you.
This is our very last one.
So this one is for looking at our fleet modernization, potentially through an enterprise fleet management or leasing model. So first, I want to preface the conversation with the fact that obviously on a consumer level, when you think of a lease at a dealership, sometimes there's not good connotations associated with that. And that this is not at all the same. This is geared toward municipal programs, municipal cities. They're open-ended municipal leases, which would mean you would have no mileage restrictions. We're a big community, but we're driving a significant amount of miles, but there wouldn't be any mileage restrictions we would need to be concerned about. There's no abnormal wear and tear penalties, there's no early termination penalties. Essentially, the city would retain all rights of ownership. We can install any aftermarket equipment, particularly on our safety vehicles, but even on any other vehicles that we would have in our fleet. So there's no limitations on that. And to that end, we would have full control over how long we hold on to a vehicle or don't. We would be partnering with enterprise to manage the fleet. They would make recommendations to us on a yearly basis of, what vehicles might be time to cycle out, because they would eventually give us the best equity return on our vehicles that would be able to continue to keep our fleet modern and updated and serving our community in a positive manner. Right now, if you look at our fleet makeup, over 40% of it, 43% of it, at least of the light duty fleet, is more than 10 years old. We have some vehicles as old as 29 and 30 years old. There's at least one vehicle that's old. A couple of them are up in that range. So a lot of them predate many of the safety features that we expected in our car that we drive in every day. They obviously are they're less fuel efficient. So looking to this model, it would allow us to not have the significant capital outlay, something that's much more sustainable that we can budget for and plan for on a year-to-year basis. Is one of the benefits of it, so it would be more sustainable, because at the rate so far what we've done to replace maybe 2 vehicles a year is a lot of money to buy them outright, and we'll never, at this point, it doesn't look like we would ever catch up to where we probably need to be to get our fleet to serving our community, serving our staff, to be able to do their jobs in the best way that they can. Having vehicles that go down and require significant maintenance, repairs that can take them out of service, particularly our public safety vehicles, is an impact. And being able to get our fleet up to a newer, maybe a 5-year cycle that's closer to what we would be looking to do. But we have a model that we would bring forward to show you what each model could look like with the cost savings, because we would be capitalizing on not only the equity that would be returned, but also in drastically lowering our maintenance budget. Right now, I think if you look at what we budget per year, it's about $250 a month per vehicle, which is a lot, because of a lot of the major repairs that are required We would expect that to drop at least 35%, probably in the first year, over the course of a 5-year turnover of the entire fleet to get it more modern. It could drop to probably around 5% of our current fleet budget. At the same time, our fuel maintenance budget, our fuel budget would be decreasing, because we would have more efficient vehicles. So there's significant cost savings just in the operation of our fleet as a whole, as well as reducing the impacts of having vehicles out for service for long periods. And then, as I mentioned, this just the safety for our employees and the public. There's many of our vehicles that don't have backup cameras, that don't have the stabilization features that help prevent rollovers and all sorts of those issues. So this is one a model that I wanted to propose, at least exploring with the council, to see if this is something that you would be open to helping us modernize our fleet and better serve our community.
Question?
I guess I'm not understanding, this would be, when you say, is this Parks and Public Works?
This is all fleet, so it would be public works, it would be public safety, so police, fire, any of the low duty vehicles that basically can be on 1 ton. So obviously it wouldn't be our ambulance or a fire truck or some of the heavier duty construction equipment, dump truck or anything like that. Those would be obviously separate from this leasing model that we would still deal with separately in terms of managing that part of the fleet. But this would be our patrol vehicles, our.
Right, but I think we have new patrol vehicles within the last couple of years. I remember we had a consultant, I think, came and did a survey for the prior council. And we went to it took a long time to get, if I recall, the model, et cetera, but they're all here. So now we have, I guess, fairly new, it's all relative, I know. But I think a lot of our vehicles have been replaced. I understand not all. That's why I was thinking that this had to do with, I think it was Parks and Public Works and some of the tertiary vehicles that are used, but they're not necessarily the ones that are used on a regular basis. Are very old.
So it's both. I mean, obviously, you're right. The Parks and Public Works fleet and community services fleet, part of our fleet is the oldest. I will defer to the chief and he can correct me if I misstate anything. The public safety fleet, many of the vehicles have been replaced. I know according to their standards for use and the runtime and all of that, they typically require quicker turnover of the fleet. And so I know, as you mentioned, there was, I believe, 6 vehicles replaced all at once, which was probably a very significant budget impact. And then police have to approve 1 or 2 per year, but the sustainability of that and keeping up, you know, I mean, 4 or 5 years from whenever those were purchased, we're repurchasing 6 whole new vehicles. So the model will show that the enterprise put together. At this point, it shows we would potentially, over the course of 10 years, with modernizing the entire fleet, we'd save $100 million going through this model because of how the program would operate without minimizing our capital outlay plus all the savings we would have. And as it comes, and it's like, you know, although some of the vehicles were replaced, if we're trying to maintain that 5, 4, 5, 6, whatever the right number would be for our fleet, we'll continually face these big budget impacts that are up and down throughout the years of how the budget works. So this helps make it more sustainable. It should save us money in the long term. And so it is just a concept, you know, to show to you if you're interested in seeing that, of what it could look like. And as I said, we would always maintain ownership of our fleet through this program. So if the economy changes, you know, they track the equity of vehicles. Right now, there's a good return on vehicles. There's some vehicles you can waste the way the program structured where you would be able to pretty much sell them after using them for a couple of years for what you paid for them, and reinvest that in the fleet. So, but that may not always be the case, obviously. And so that's part of the partnership with them, is they would assess every year fleet for us and do the analysis and tell us, maybe you should hold on to it. We recommend you turn it in, but they're never in control of whether we turn anything in.
You're talking about rolling this out.
We're not gonna change every vehicle,
No,
each
right.
vehicle
Yeah, I mean, phased in.
phased in. Okay.
And so, we might pick every vehicle that's more than 10 years old, the first year, or whatever limit we set. We have models that would show that you what the capital outlay and how it would change the makeup of our maintenance and fuel budgets and everything, and savings to offset some of that cost. But yeah, it would be a phase-in program probably over 5 years. It wouldn't be for holistically changing out the whole, fleet at once or anything.
And also do the, I'm thinking because of general plans, and I know that there's a climate impact, portion that we now have to, add to our city, and we have not moved any of our vehicles into being electric or, I don't know, blended. I think we had some small, perhaps in, two that we have operating now, but I mean, for the other ones, aside from public safety. And so does this, I don't know what enterprise leasing offers our city in terms of.
Yes, so that's actually been part of the conversation as well, knowing that, it is the future. And there are a lot of obligations that we're just required to start implementing, in our fleet as it is. To discuss what that could look like, how they can help with that. They do the whole fleet for AQMD, so they've been looking at, they have to walk the talk, they need to make sure their fleet's where it needs to be in terms of electrification. So they're well aware of all the electrification standards and that they would be able to help assist us in moving that forward. Another point that I didn't bring up is, which you may not be aware of, just this last purchasing of our fleet vehicles that were part of this year's budget, which we typically use National Auto Fleet for our Sourcewell, or through the Sourcewell program. We did finally get allocation of 2 vehicles, but the process and the lead time to get those vehicles is very, very long. Obviously, the reach of the enterprise program is far and wide bigger than what we have, though they definitely have more inventory, more resources, and more that they can help fulfill needs when we have them versus waiting 6-9 months potentially for some of these vehicles, just based on the allocations they get for their overall fleet that they serve. And there are many cities in our area that partner with them. And so of course, if this were to move forward with your approval, that we would present more of that information and the resources that they've provided to those jurisdictions to help with them.
Question. No, I think my main concern here would just be mainly, if there's a minimum level of commitment as we move south. I spent some time with the Adjourned previously looking at this. If you think long term, it's going to be a better financial setup for us, especially on the site. But yeah, my concern here would be just how we will allow and then level of commitments for us. This. Yeah, I have a few questions. So first one, you say 29, 30 years old. Vehicle? Do we own that? Or, okay, so it's not good. And my second question, so are we moving from national to enterprise? Is it?
So we'll be moving from national to enterprise for sourcing the vehicles. They would help deploy and manage our whole program. They have software that helps manage the maintenance and know the status of all of our vehicles at all times. In addition to that, it still would be through Sourcewell. They were awarded a contract through Sourcewell, so we would still be part of a Sourcewell program. It would just be through enterprise, not the national auto fleet, and then we would be on this leasing program model that would help us to modernize our fleet more quickly and manage it better. So.
Do you have any other choice besides those 2?
We did reach out to a couple other, not gonna give names for you, a couple other lease fleet management type companies, and for the most part, they were not interested, because our fleet's so small, I think. Enterprise actually has a pretty, I guess more of a family feel, from what I've seen of them. Although they're quite big, they have very local presences spread out versus having just like a national location in New York or wherever. Some of the other ones are based that they were kind of like, oh, how many people? 30? Yeah, we need like 3,300. Like, no, we don't have. So we just did not get a response from China.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
So as we roll out the older vehicles, are there any state requirement that for during certain time you have to comply with going full electric or there's none?
We are tracking that. There are some timelines coming up where we need to start implementing, and part of that conversation, the reply from CIP is we also need the infrastructure to support doing that. But yeah, there are guidelines that we'll have to see in set wise to remove the fleet, showing we're moving to more of an electrification of what can be electrified in.
So I think I also brought up in previous meetings, so I attended the starting up from meeting AQM delegation fund $200 million for to help for the subsidize or to help see go build up all those electric charging forms. Please explore that if there's any fund.
Yeah, we're looking into other outside funding sources that could be utilized along with the AQMD funding that we get annually, but we are looking at other ways of helping fund that part of the program.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Any requests?
We do not have any.
You guys support the take a look.
Yes.
Thank you. Item three.
Yes, Mayor, that's it, and I will run us through our next steps slides here, just 2 more slides, I think. So next steps, we appreciate the council's time this morning. This is a heavy lift process. Our next steps here, beginning Monday, with the consensus of the council on these priority initiatives, we will begin feedback from the community. You'll notice we did leave in some of the feedback from the council from last year. We have expanded the amount of time that we are bringing this to the community, so there's a longer period of time so the community provides with their feedback and input. We'll also be holding a town hall on the 15th to focus on our budget presentation and provide additional opportunities for the residents to opine on this and give us some feedback on these initiatives. With that, a couple of important dates, you will have seen this as an attachment to this staff report, our budget calendar. We have several dates coming up over the next few months that we will have the finalization of our priority initiatives in the first meeting in March. And then we'll move into our study sessions on our CIP budget and our operating budget in March and April respectively. With final adoption, hopefully in May of this year, we have again an aggressive timeline. Given that we have an interim finance director and our staff are working double time on getting a lot of this buttoned up, but as I mentioned, this is one of the most important things we do annually, so we're looking forward to bringing you a sound and balanced budget again this year. With that, Mayor, this concludes staff's portion of this, and we're open if there are any other comments, questions, or additions from the council. Any comments?
Just so I understand, on the 15th, the town hall will be in person or by Zoom, and is it gonna be staff doing a similar presentation in each of the subject matters, or are you doing it, or what are we?
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
What do you plan?
We plan to run something very similar to this, depending on how much more refined we have any of these at that time, we will provide a little more refinement, but our goal is to have it slightly more interactive with the community. So we have found that online presentations, the Zoom presentation component gets a better turnout than the in-person. I believe I was talking to staff last year. I think we had one person in person, if I remember correctly. So we're still ironing out whether it's beneficial to have an in-person versus just focusing solely on Zoom. Just given, again, this is the dynamics of broadcasting both ways. We're trying to make sure we balance the time efficiently so the public doesn't come here for no purpose.
So it would be 6 o'clock, either Zoom or here and on Zoom, is what you're looking at with the department heads and yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that the school district just recently had the facilities meeting.
Right.
And they had a large turnout in person as well. I don't know how they did on Zoom, so attitudes may have changed.
Sure, absolutely. We'll look at holding in person.
Any other comments, questions?
It depends on rain and cold. There's a
What's on-
playoff game, right? Lots of things, so. You might want to think about the date, right?
So, city members, do you have everything you need?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mayor. We really appreciate your time on this.
Thank you. So we go to consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? So,
Second.
roll call please.
Councilmember Cho,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Tall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Shepherd Rami,
Yes.
Mayor Wong.
Yes. Do we have any written communication or public writings for distribution?
We do not.
Is there anyone wishing to speak at this time? If so, please say your name and address for the record. As a reminder, city council is not legally allowed to engage in discussion on any items that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, are there any items the city council would like to add to the future agenda? Seeing none, do any council members have a special adjournment?
Yes, I would like to adjourn the meeting on behalf of Sylvia Whitehall. She was a longtime Hill Harbison House board member, a Girl Scout leader, Girl Scout Service Unit leader, as well as involved in the Mariners, which is another scouting organization, and many at the city, state, the Greater Girl Scouts of LA. She was 95 years old, and the community is very sad to hear her passing in December. And I think it would be appropriate if we did on her contribution.
You know, I would, too, and that is to, close in honor of Bert McKee. Bert was a star football player for San Marino. Went on and started PCC, played at Cal, and played on a Cal rugby team that was serious. He died of a brain tumor, unfortunately, and but he participated in every sport possible in high school and was a superstar there. He died at the age of 7.
Okay, well, if not, I'm gonna adjourn this meeting to February 14th. Oh my.
We apologize.